Today is June the 30th, 2020. The time is now 5:37. Sorry, we're running a little bit late, but again, this new age that we're in, the age of COVID, makes for some challenging times when we try to sign on and sign off. But we're trying to get better at this process to make sure that we get started on time so that we respect your time. We hope that you are joining us to learn a little bit more about the Board of Education rather than getting your news from the headlines, or rather than hearing things about the Board of Education, the Rochester City School District, when some bad stuff happens. We hope that you're tuning in to see us when we're proactive, when we're trying to prevent crises, and we're trying to make sure our children get what they are required and have every right to get by law. So that's what the Board of Education is about this evening, and hopefully every evening that you turn in. Before we get to our business, and it's a pretty light agenda, staff and my colleagues have asked me to remind you all about a couple things that are going on in our district. First thing is, always make sure that if you get a chance to go to RCSD, www.rcsdk12.org. There you'll find our website with a lot of different things happening in the district. Matter of fact, we had a meeting earlier this morning, and we realized that the Board of Education put a lot of work into updating our mission and vision statement. And we realized at a meeting today that the website doesn't reflect those new changes. So we do want our website, the Board of Education does want our website to reflect our values, what we're doing, and we want it to be up to date, and our staff does a great job, but sometimes we don't get information to them. So we're gonna make sure that that mission and vision statement gets updated. But there's other things that you can see when you go to our website. My colleagues have asked to remind you that in addition to staying on top of things by watching this programming and going to our website, you can actually be actively involved and engaged by being a parent rep. Our able staff reminds us that you can go to our website, that would be Board of Education RCS at rcsdk12.org, and you can sign up to be a parent rep. I know my colleague, Commissioner Adams, mentioned that at our last meeting. It is really vital that we have parents being involved in our committee structure. That's where a lot of the recommendations take place. That's where the superintendent and her staff present new ideas and old ideas. And we have chairs of our various committees, and I know each and every one of my colleagues who chairs those committees would really value your input as being a parent participant. You go to that website, again, Board of Education at rcsdk12.org, and there you'll find, Kalia tells me, an application to apply. And we've gotten some, but we prefer more than less to make sure that we have every opportunity to get a diverse set of citizens involved in that committee process. I was also asked to remind you all that there's a lot of stuff happening in our city and in our district, but one of the most important things is on July the 8th, 2020, I emphasize the word our state monitor will conduct another hearing. She's already had one. It's Dr. Shelley Jallo, and she's going to have another one. And that is going to take place on July the 8th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. All are welcome via the internet. And if you want to sign up, now someone's going to correct me if I don't have this right, you sign up at State Monitor at rcsdk12.org. Let me repeat that. And no one's correcting me, so I must be right about that. State Monitor at rcsdk12.org, and that is the address that you'd send an email to sign up to speak before the State Monitor, and that is, again,
President White?
Yes, ma'am.
That email is correct, and people who are going to sign up to speak should do so by noon on the day of the public hearing.
Excellent. Thank you for that reminder. By noon. You should speak up. Dr. Jallo, are you there? Are you with us right now?
Yes.
What's the topic? Because I know you'll have three. This is the second one. Is there a specific topic? I believe there's a topic for this one. Could you tell folks what it's about?
The topic of discussion for next week will be academics.
All right, there you go. State Monitor at rcsdk12.org, 5 through 6 p.m. 6:30 p.m. And again, our clerk, what is the time frame for doing that? When do you have to sign up by?
Sign up by noon on the day of the public hearing.
Perfect. So that gives folks a lot of time, July the 8th. All right, next item on our agenda. We don't have any minutes to approve, is that right? Hope you're muted.
Not for this meeting, but for
Not for
the
this
HR
meeting.
committee.
But I do believe we have some speakers. Is that right?
That is correct. We have 2 speakers tonight.
So the floor is yours. You invite them in and let's hear what they have to say.
Our first speaker is a student. Her name is Deziree Garrick. Deziree has entered the room. I'm going to ask Deziree to start the video, and then Deziree will have 2 minutes to speak. Deziree, are you with us? Deziree, you can unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, just a second.
Deziree, if you can start your video so that we can see you. Awesome. Thank you for joining us. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm a student at East High School. I'm a student at East High School, and I'm pretty much just here to talk about how in our district, we have a history of high. Can you take that in the kitchen? Jesus.
Deziree,
Sorry.
I'm going to restart your time, okay?
All right. So in our school district, we have a high turnover rate when it comes to staff and superintendents. And our district is very different from others, mainly because we have a board that's paid differently. And some of our teachers are certainly underqualified to teach at-risk youth and urban youth. We have programs for reading and fluency, but they're not really showing progress when it comes to like how the presentation looks and if it's interactive for their students, because it looks like as if they're from the 2000s. And teachers in the RCSD must be all in. That's a motto we have at East. And I know that some of them are going to take offense to what I have to say, but they aren't doing enough. And I'm not saying that they're not doing enough when it comes to bringing in materials or taking money from their own pockets. I mean, they're not really coming in and actually being open to what we have to hear, what we have to say when it comes to us waking up in the morning and we have to go through our normal adversities before we get to school. And then we're challenged by a teacher when they tell us to do a million things when you've already had to jump through a million hoops just to get there. We don't have to bring in special resources for our students, but what we really need is someone who knows that school is not easy for urban students, especially when we live in the 3rd most poverty-stricken city. We need to not only hold teachers accountable when it comes to listening to students when we have bad days, but we need teachers that are highly qualified in their fields, because students are not going to want to learn or come to school if they're not being taught things that are going to be retainable. And also, I can't stress this enough. If a student speaks using foul language, that doesn't mean that they're unintelligent or they don't know what they're talking about. A lot of teachers like to write that off as if a student is unintelligent or not worthy of their attention or actually listening, when in reality, they just don't know how to articulate it in the way that other students can. And another point is all teachers do not know how to communicate with urban students. And it's something that we truly need to work on in our city, because I have teachers in my building who they might not know how to necessarily communicate with our students, or they communicate in a robotic way because they don't want to push any boundaries. And sometimes boundaries need to be pushed, but in the right way. And it's something that we definitely could work on.
Thank you very much, Deziree, for your comments. We truly appreciate them. Our next speaker is Andrea Ingham. She is a staff person. Welcome, Andrea. Please unmute yourself.
Hello. Okay. So good evening. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I would like to talk to you about the idea of standards-based grading, or SBG for short, and why it would benefit our CSD students. There is no way that I will be able to discuss everything there is to know about SBG in just 2 minutes, so I encourage you to seek out more information. You may talk to some teachers who have already began implementing SBG or something similar, but the reason I am bringing this to you here today is because I truly believe this should be district-wide. This would not be an easy transition or process for anyone, including teachers, parents, and students, because it is far from the norm for most. If you ask a principal to name the most important things in a lesson plan, I can almost guarantee one of the things they will say is learning targets. But how are we measuring our students' understanding and mastery of these learning targets? Basically, SBG is a system that measures student progress relative to specific learning standards. SBG practices exclude student behaviors. In the middle and high school specifically, should student grades include compliance, attendance, promptness, etc., or should the grades represent what the student knows? The answer should be simple, but it's usually not. SBG should only take into account a student's performance on summative assessment, not formative, and consider recent academic achievement rather than averaging performance over time. Along with giving a clearer picture of a student's mastery of a given standard or topic, SBG is a much more equitable system than traditional grading. Think about what happens to a student's grade when they receive a 0 on an assignment, whatever the reason may be. 1 0 can bring down the grade immensely depending on the number of assignments and the weights the teacher uses. SBG eliminates this problem because the student should be given multiple opportunities to demonstrate understanding of a given standard. Another buzzword you may have heard of is growth mindset. SBG helps promote growth mindset because the test does not signify the end. With SBG, there is always a chance to show that you've mastered a given standard because, well, isn't that the goal? With traditional grading, a student might take a test, fail it, and the class moves on. When will that student be given a chance to go back and learn the material and then demonstrate that they have learned it? SBG really makes you think about the purpose of school and the meaning of grades. Do our students really know what their grade represents? Do they know what they have to do to actually earn a specific grade? If SBG is done right, you should be able to look at a teacher's grade book and give a fairly accurate prediction of how the student will do on a summative test, such as a state test. Teachers will also look at the student's grades from previous years and know exactly what the student has mastered. Also, since teachers transfer schools often, students may change schools and families may have children in multiple schools, there should be a uniform system that is easy to understand no matter what school a student is at. Transitioning to SBG is not easy. There is a lot to understand, and many teachers want to do things the way they've always done it. But we need to think about our current grading system as what is right for students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ingham. We appreciate your comments. President White, that completes our speakers portion tonight.
Thank you to both of our speakers tonight. We appreciate your comments, and we will make sure that the board has an opportunity to deliberate on those observations and suggestions. I do want to remind folks that there is an opportunity to do just what our two speakers did, and it's pretty straightforward and easy. You just indicate to the Board of Education and our staff that you're interested in sharing your public comment. You can do that by sending an email to boardofelducation@rcsdk12.org. And when you do that, all you need to do is provide your name, your affiliation, student, parent, community member, or staff, your telephone number, and the specific topic that you're interested in addressing. It is that simple. And just as our clerk indicated earlier on, you have to do that by 12 o'clock on the day of the meeting. And for those who like to listen rather than speak, there's a number of different venues where you can see your Board of Education and your superintendent and the staff at work by tuning in at RCSD's Facebook page, our YouTube page, and on the district's website, which again is www.rcsdk12.org/RCSD-TV. All right, I think we are now done with the speakers portion of our list. We then are going to conduct one of those committee meetings that I referenced earlier on. That committee is Human Relations.
President White?
Yes, ma'am.
We have a list of resolutions that need to be considered this evening.
I'm sorry. I got to pull that up. Why don't you call them out, because I don't have that printed up. I just was printing it up now. Can you call them out?
First resolution is Resolution 1032.
Is there a motion to discuss Resolution 1032?
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard Vice President Elliott. I don't see her on my screen, but so we have a motion, a resolution properly before the Board of Education. Is there any questions or comments regarding that resolution? I got to pull up my participant screen. That's how we do it in this COVID day and age. I don't
Vice
see
President
anyone.
Elliott has a question, President White.
Just saw our hand raised. Yep, Vice President Elliott, go ahead.
So the independent monitor, I didn't realize, maybe I didn't read the legislation well enough, that we were identifying independent monitors for, this is the RISE program that
Yes,
we're
Vice
having
President.
an independent monitor for. Can you talk a little bit about that, Madam Superintendent?
I can. So when schools close and reopen, they're individually have an independent monitor. There are 2 schools in Syracuse and 1 in Buffalo and then 1 in Rochester. So the RISE school closed down and reopened very quickly during the summer of 1920, the 1920 school year. And because of, the current monitor helped and assisted the principal with instructional practices, observations, etc. Because of COVID-19 and just the fact that there was some interruption, I did speak with the Deputy Commissioner of Education and with all schools that have school-appointed independent monitors. We are to go just another year, but to pull back that time, we're halving it, excuse me. And so that we renegotiated the contract. It is half of what it was during the 1920 school year, and that work will begin July 1st, and it's not to exceed the amount that you see listed on the resolution.
Yeah, it just seems as if this is the first time I'm, unless my colleagues can remind me and recall, that we've had an independent monitor at one of the receivership schools. I just don't recall that. This is the first time I'm seeing this. So what is she to be? What is her role?
She works. I just want to do a slight correction. RISE is not a receivership school. It would have been, but the school closed, so it's currently in good standing. But she works side by side with the principal, and basically it's a gradual release and basically giving her the ability to kind of fly on her own. But when you close a school and reopen, there's just a lot that is involved with that. And so, she's a principal coach. She helps, again, with instructional practices, making sure that she's visiting classrooms with teachers to observe their practices. So it's basically a coach for the principal. So again, she won't be interacting with the principal to the extent that she was during the 1920 school year. It's pulled back, and then at the end of 2021 school year, that resource will no longer be needed.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm not sure we're okay.
I didn't forget about you all. So I see 1032. Is there any, that was 1032. Are there any other questions or comments regarding 1032?
Man, there's other folks who have their hands up, so
I see. I'm having a little bit computer difficulty. I see Ricardo Adams.
If I could interject, President White, I'm so sorry. We have to go back also after this resolution. 1030 and 1031 were not called. I was looking at the wrong sheet. My apologies.
I saw, no need to apologize. I see them there. I printed out the sheet. I see Ricardo Adams and then Commissioner LeBron.
So
Adams.
I'm glad that we're reducing the amount of money spent there on that consultant in half. But I still would request that we they be required to do a reveal their whatever they've learned or done with this money at a public meeting, because it's not a requirement, and I just think the public needs to know why we spending this money. We being forced to pay for this consultant.
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to see that consultant have to do a public meeting at the end of the school year. Let us know what they've done, why we had to spend that money on it.
So, Commissioner Adams, would it be helpful to maybe not a public meeting, but do a presentation at a board meeting so people are aware?
That is a public meeting.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right. I just making sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding Resolution 1032?
Yep, I'm next.
Yep.
My hand is up.
Commissioner LeBron.
Yeah, so kind of going back to what Ricardo Adams, Commissioner Adams is talking about. And then to go back a little bit to what Commissioner Elliott was saying, this conversation in terms of the monitor for the RISE school and the RISE model is one that started under Barbara Dean Williams. I have expressed a number of times throughout the last 2 years, we should have not gone into this model. The school district cannot afford this model. But this is the model that the previous superintendent selected, and there was a monitor appointed then. There were extensive conversations around this individual person has been in this position. We have never had a presentation, have ever met her. I have never met her at a board meeting. I have not ever recalled that she has come in to give a presentation about what is happening at RISE. It has always gone through the previous superintendent and other administrators, chiefs and deputies. But to the point that we're paying this individual the amount of money that we're paying them, one, I'm not gonna be voting yes on this resolution, although I do understand that the state at this point is requiring us to have a monitor because of the model, because of us choosing to keep this school open the way that we kept it open. This was the requirement. I'm still voting no, but I do think that the community and this board should have an understanding of what exactly has happened over the last 2 years over there, what they're done, what we're paying for, what are the outcomes. I don't personally just want to see lessons learned. I want to see the data. I want to understand. And I also would like in that presentation, the finance piece also presented to the community, how much we've paid and what we're paying for.
Okay, that's fair. What I can do, Commissioner LeBron, Commissioner Adams, Vice President Elliott, and the rest of our commissioners is I don't have access to the information anymore, but I did come on the visit. So we have been, when I was in my state role, so I can ask for those documents. So you can at least see the progress reports and the data that was submitted to us when I was in the state. And then we can certainly arrange for a presentation. There are no issues there. I think the other piece, not realizing that you weren't familiar completely with this or have been given information, the Commissioner of Education will also makes visits to have a conversation with the principal, with the monitor, and assesses, right, and has conversations about that. So I can get information. I don't know. I'll try and see if I can make sure that it happens. Well, actually, we don't have a Friday letter, Thursday, but if not, I'll make sure that it gets out within a timely fashion. That's no issue.
I see.
And I'll even make sure that I send the legislation so you can see where it comes from.
Dr. Jallo, I want to add some comments, but I'll wait until Dr. Jallo has made some remarks.
It's very short. I just attended a meeting, was invited to a meeting where the monitor did a presentation about the school to state officials and district people from the district and from the school, and is preparing another report. So this monitor has been given reports. I don't know where they've gone, but she did one as recently as this week or last week.
Thank you, Dr. Jallo. I just wanted to add that as I think a number of people have indicated, this was not something that we opted for voluntarily. This was imposed by the state. We didn't at the time have any choice in the matter, and certainly not in terms of the money that is paid. The other thing that I wanted to say is my recollection is that we got regular reports to the extent that they were available and arranged by Beth Massetti Miller. She was the person assigned to this particular project. She was responsible for crafting it and putting it together for our prior superintendent. She also gave us, I recall receiving reports about its progress. I hate to step out here on this like this, but I think my recollection is pretty good that they had made some progress at RISE in terms of where they were at before. I think it was number 41 school, still is number 41 school. So And actually, I recall when we did the mid-year cuts being very concerned that the progress that they had made was going to be put in jeopardy because that school suffered a number of cuts. And I recall saying, what was the point of the state mandating that we create a new model, seeing some progress? And again, I don't want to debate that. That was just my recollection. But then starting to yank as a result of these cuts that nobody could have anticipated, they're pulling the rug out from under these folks. So I do recall receiving some indication about how that school was modeled. I know we got a number of reports once it was constructed. They even talked to the board about what it was going to be called, Rise versus some other name. I'm pretty sure Beth Massetti Miller offered some indication on how it was doing in terms of performance indicators, which made me really be concerned about the mid-year cuts, which nobody could have helped. But I remember those teachers and other people saying, wait a second, all this good work, and now we can't even implement with fidelity.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, since this is all public record, that I did not say there was no information received from administration or the previous superintendent. My point is that nobody on this board has, I have not seen the monitor herself ever present to the school board. And so I don't think any of my colleagues can say, I know what she looks like, I know what she sounds like. She can herself articulate what she herself has been doing, because she is someone that this school district is paying a lot of money for. And yes, the school district did not have the option to not have a monitor based on the model that we provided, based on wanting to keep that school open. The school district did have an opportunity, however, to just close the school and not have the model and not have to have a monitor attached to it and pay the amount of money we were paying this individual. So Dr. Myers, you're saying this resolution is $125,000 because it's for 1 year. And so I recall that her salary was closer to $200,000 when we first initially did the contract with her. But I will go back and double check on that resolution, because like I said, that was a while ago with previous administration and deputies that were here.
Any other questions or comments? There being none, let's go ahead and vote on resolution 1032. All those in favor of resolution 1032 indicate so by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And please make sure your video is on. Thanks. All right, I think our clerk has recorded that.
Could I just
I'm sorry,
say something?
I'm voting no, so.
I want to make sure Commissioner LeBron's vote is heard. She had voted no. You got that, Madam Clerk? Superintendent Myers-Small, you were going to say something?
Yeah, it's 62,000. It's half of that. The budget line is was allocated for 125, but we did renegotiate, so it is not to exceed 62,000. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
I think it says it right there in the resolution.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear. That's all.
All right. So
President White,
yes, ma'am.
I need to make sure that Commissioner LeBron is the only nay.
Is there any other nays out there? I guess not.
Thank you.
Seems like the ayes have it. Let's next move to, we might as well just keep moving forward here. How about resolution 1033? I know we got to go back, but how about resolution 1033? A resolution related to the Community Partners to Support Community Schools Initiative. Is there a motion just to get the resolution on the floor to discuss?
Motion.
I heard Commissioner Malloy, thank you. I heard Vice President Elliott. The motion, the resolution is now properly before the Board of Education. Any questions or comments regarding that resolution 1033? I'm looking very closely at my participant list. I see Vice President Elliott. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. First of all, I'm just concerned about the amount of money that these organizations are getting for this. And the reason I say that, Commissioner Superintendent Myers-Small, is because I recall, and I won't call the name, but there was a person, and I know this was political. She did have the background, but I know it was political, that was making $107,000 when community-based organizations was doing the same work, and we're getting pennies of that. So, and I guess, you know, when I saw her, I told her that, that work was already being done. So having said that, I'm not sure what these organizations are going to be doing and what schools are they going to be connected to. This is just because I'm in these community-based organizations and I know the work that the community-based organizations are doing with schools. When we're paying these people, well, in this case, these organizations, that kind of money, I'm just concerned that, and I'm sort of going with my community-based organization hat now. When people in the community do this work and other people are getting far higher salaries than the people that who are actually have been doing this work for a very long time. So can you talk about it a little bit? I know I'm sort of all over the place, but can you just sort of share with me about the money that we're spending in these organizations and why?
Sure. I'm going to ask Deputy Superintendent Linda Quick
Sure.
provide some insight.
Great question, Vice President Elliott. This particular $50,000 expenditure is for community site coordinator support for the summer months, July and August, at schools number 17, Rise, and School 45. So it really is a continuation of the work that the community site coordinators were doing during the school year pursuant to the grant, but it will continue the work over the summer months at those 3 schools.
Okay. For some, maybe I misread because I thought this was, unless I misread it, I thought it was like for 1.2 million. So I'm wrong on that, I guess.
So it's part of a larger multi-year grant that actually supported full school year programming at a number of different locations, including 1745 and Rise. It also included 3 as well, but there were multiple community site coordinators and they were funded during the school year. But this particular extension is actually for the summer months of July and August.
Okay, no funding in there for school 9?
No school 9, no.
Why?
This grant, the eligibility for this grant was only for schools 17, 45, Rise, and 3.
Are they the only community schools aside from school 9?
No, but pursuant to the grant dollars that were eligible to be applied, those are the only schools that were able to be grant funded through this pot of money. And you can see it's school improvement grant money and target fund 1003 target fund money.
Okay, I apologize. I think I misread the resolution.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see Commissioner Shepard.
Yeah, can you talk about what they've been doing since schools have been closed down and why they would need an extension for the summertime when things are going to be changed drastically for this summer?
They have continued to work with the principals and staff and school community right through the closure. And I think, in fact, I think some would probably tell you that they're needed more now than ever to do community outreach and provide that support during closure. And as we transition through the summer and remain in closure, we'll continue to have them working in the same capacity. Actually, our community schools outreach has really been expected to kick up to a whole new level. It is our conduit to our community and our families during this COVID time period.
Dr. Jalal, I'll get to you in a second. My question really briefly is these grants, this is grant money, right? Usually these grants, particularly these community service grants, require a site coordinator. Isn't that right? I mean, I don't think you have, I'm not familiar with this grant specifically, but my understanding is for these community schools initiatives grants, you have, and I've been to a number of different forums for these things, they require a community site coordinator. That you're looking kind of weird thinking that doesn't sound right to you, but that was my recollection. That's not what you know? So in other words, if you get this grant money, you have to have a community site coordinator.
That's what the purpose is, yes.
Yep,
the 1.2 million that that Vice President Elliott referred to is to fund the community site coordinators at those schools.
That's right. Okay. I'm sorry, Dr. Jallo.
I just wanted to get clarification. So 1.25 million was already spent, totally exhausted. All that money is gone. And
This is actually part of, this is still grant funding. It is still part of the original grant, and we're being allowed to carry it through August, and it's still part of that original grant pot.
so was all that money spent or not spent? If it was not spent, you only need $50,000 for this position. And after you pay for the position, what services do children receive? That's one. If the money was not spent, why do you need an extra $50,000 if there's still money left over, right? And also, you know, I think when you have these grants, you have to, not you, but someone representing these grants should present evidence of impact. How do you know that 1.25 million made a difference based on what they say they were going to do? Like if they said they were going to do 1,000 hours of service, did they do 1,000 hours of service? If they said they were going to do extended day programs, did they do it? You know, some evidence of impact. We know what they were supposed to do, but we don't have any evidence that they actually did it or that it had any impact. So I think that you need that to validate the 1.25 million, and you kind of need that to validate an extra 50,000. And this is not directed at you, Linda. I'm saying this is a practice that should be utilized for all grants, so that you just don't roll over grants and keep giving the impact.
I would add to that, you know, we changed our practice after the 2018 debacle about what was actually left in our funding. The board changed its practice to include in our resolutions that amount of money which was left in a particular budget line. I see that that is not really part of this language here, but that might in part provide some of the clarity that you need, Dr. Jallo. We don't know by looking at this how much has been spent and how much is left. And here's the thing: we have when we went through that difficulty in 2018, the board decided that we needed to keep a running tally, and the best way to do that was we decided to change our resolution so that it indicated what, of course, what's the justification, what do you need, and then how much is this current resolution going to cost, and then what's the remainder on that budget line. I notice now for the first time with these grant, at least with this particular grant, it doesn't give you a running tally at all. That might, I don't know if that addresses part of your issue, Dr. Jallo.
So let me be clear, it's not my issue.
No,
right?
What you raised.
Is our,
right.
Our challenge, right? I'm just saying you don't know anything about the money. You don't know anything about the children served. You don't know what the principals think about the services their students receive. There's a lot of unknowns about the original allocation of money, and there's even greater concerns or unknowns about the extra money being asked. That's the only thing I'm bringing to the table. And if you have a protocol that says you know how much money the balance is supposed to be identified for you, then that has not happened in this case.
Any other questions or comments? Let me just, so this issue just doesn't end here. I guess let me ask this question.
Can I add anything?
Yes, sure. No,
you know, those 3 locations are open for some.
We're going to continue to work with our parents and families throughout the summer. Even though we're in closure, they've been working since March with our families, with our schools in remote settings, and they'll continue to work during the summer to do outreach to those families and community members. It's an ongoing issue for us to maintain community contact, and those community site coordinators are vital to help support our families during this closure. They'll do, family activities, family outreach, trying to support students through closure to make sure that they get enhanced literacy opportunities, supports via our website. Our plan is that they continue right through the summer. Even though we're in building closure, our district is still opening. We're still providing meals. We're still providing additional supports and resources to our families.
So what I was going to get to when I let everybody finish asking their questions is, I noticed that this resolution is dated, what indicates that the current contract expires June the 30th. Is there, and no one has to answer this, Dr. Myers-Smalls, but this really is a bad day to bring this if the contract is ending on June the 30th, right? I mean, you would think that you would give the board a little more notice to ask the questions, for example, that Dr. Jallo has asked. So my next question is, Leslie, would it be, I know the date is June the 30th, but what are the ripple effects if we don't approve this today, get some of the answers that Dr. Jallo has wisely asked, because it's the 30th, will they just not work? What would happen?
I would assume so, but I'll have Deputy Quick answer, right? I guess they wouldn't come into work. I'm not, let me stop.
Sure.
Not be authorized to pay them, and it's only grant dollars that we have to support it, so they would not be working.
Didn't hear, you dropped off at the end.
I'm sorry, they would not be working. No, we would have to have the approval to expend the grant dollars, and we have no other way of paying them, and they haven't been approved to be working. So, no pay, no work.
Well, I see Commissioner LeBron. Commissioner LeBron.
So I just want to say I'm going to again be voting no on all resolutions because I have, for the third week in a row now, I keep repeating that we keep getting resolutions. Although I will say staff did email us the resolution Sunday night. So I do appreciate that staff was working Sunday night to send them out. It is still not a process that we had all agreed to from repeatedly conversations around a process for any of the resolutions tonight. However, my other no votes tonight is nothing against anyone who's on the resolutions.
I know that's Commissioner LeBron, just raise your hand. I don't know, Leslie, do you see any solution for this? It seems like Linda has indicated that it's either make or break, people won't be working. Hold on, I see Vice President Elliott raising her hand.
Let's see if we got the votes, Mr. President.
All
I'm
right,
willing to support it.
that would be what we would call the question.
Call
Not to cut off debate, but let's just go ahead and have the conversation. Call the question goes directly to a vote, but I just want to say this conversation should not be lost on your team, Leslie. So if this passes, we got to make sure that people get this information sooner. Okay. All right. So the question has been called. All those in favor of resolution, hold on a second, 1033, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
As all those opposed to resolution 1033 indicate by saying no.
No.
It appears from my vantage point that the ayes have it. I'm sure our clerk will correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, Commissioner Adams, you raising your hand, but I didn't see that until after the vote. I'm sorry. Commissioner Adams?
I didn't raise my hand. It was malfunction.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So let's move on to resolution 10, go back actually to resolution 1030. I need a motion to advance for conversation, resolution 1030, which relates to the creation of assigning acting positions to a number of staff members. Is there a motion?
Motion.
I heard Vice President Elliott move the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Any questions or conversations regarding resolution 1030? I don't see any and I don't hear any, so we're going to just go ahead and move this one to a vote. All those in favor of resolution 1030, which relates to assigning particular employees to acting positions, indicate so by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
No.
All right, seems like the ayes have it. And finally, I need a motion to advance for conversation resolution 1031. Is there a motion?
Motion.
I heard two people do it simultaneously. I'll give that to the, oh, you agree. Okay, so Commissioner Malloy moved it, Vice President Elliott seconded it. Any questions or comments regarding resolution 1031? I don't see any. So making sure your video cameras are on. All those in favor of resolution 1031.
Wait, I do have a question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Um, I was just a little confused. So this person is resigning, or was their position was abolished? I'm confused at the second paragraph.
Keisha, do you mind responding?
Is 1031?
1030 or 1031? 31.
1031.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can respond. I don't see Harry on screen right now, but the
And I
position
can't gain access. That I've been.
You've been banned.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Keisha.
Harry, did you want Harry to respond?
Please.
Oh yeah, I can respond. I was having problems gaining access. Thank you. So this particular resolution is for the restoration of Carl Pena's position. And again, we were going down the pathway of abolishing his job. However, we did not, we had an unforeseen situation in which the Director of Accountability also resigned. So therefore, we're asking to restore and retain Carl's job until we are able to stabilize the accountability department.
Got you. Okay. I was just trying to figure out if that's actually what was going on.
Yeah.
You all set, Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
Can I ask a follow-on question?
Sure, go ahead.
So this was a position that was supposed to be abolished per our budget.
No.
No?
No.
Explain the abolishment to me.
It happened after, what, about 3 weeks ago, Harry?
Oh,
That's
part
correct.
of your reorg?
That's correct.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and we haven't actually did we take a vote? We took a vote on your org chart, yes?
You approved the positions, yes.
Okay. I'm just saying, I'm trying to sort of thinking out loud here. I imagine that the timing is entirely up to you. So I guess I'm okay with it. I'm just trying to put the puzzle pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments regarding resolution 1031? I don't see any, so we're going to go ahead and move with the vote. All those in favor of resolution 1031 indicate by saying aye and making sure your video cameras are on.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Any opposition? Any opposition? I heard one nay. I think that was Commissioner LeBron's. And Madam Clerk, you recorded those votes?
Yes, President White.
All right. Okay. I think we've made it through that portion of our agenda. Vice President Elliott, I'm turning the gavel over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the February 25th HR committee meeting? And it also seems as if I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for the contract for excellence public hearing. Can I get a motion? Do I need to, I can combine those, Marisol or Carl, or do it? Okay.
Motion.
Was there a motion?
Second. Mr. Adams motioned it, and I'm going to second it. Commissioner
All right,
Adams.
thank you. Thank you both commissioners. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you. So it looks like there was a little confusion about the items that are on the agenda. I wanted information around what is our staffing going to look like as we plan to open up the school year is what I really wanted to know, and just sort of give just where we are in terms of staff. And I know people are working from home and what have you. So if we could talk about, first of all, where we are now around staffing during COVID and during this period. And then, and I know that the governor has not had any plans to move forward as of yet for the school year, but just talk a little bit about, we'll go to the staffing as we have it now during COVID-19. If you could talk a little bit about that, Madam Superintendent.
Sure, I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Harry.
Okay.
So our community knows we do have a COVID-19 reopening team, and it's broken up into 3 sections. One is operations, one is education, and one is health and safety. And so they've been meeting regularly prior to my arrival and continue to do so. Today, actually, during executive cabinet this morning, we had conversations about the fact that we were operating at central office and our Hudson Street location, that we were adhering to the 50 or less in as far as a gathering, right? We're now in phase 4, which means that we can have 50% of our workforce in. So we're looking to see what we need in each department throughout central office. And so we'll have that finalized hopefully within the next few days. So the staffing that we had, short of any resignations, retirements, or other movement, are the staff that we have. What makes it so complicated right now is just what you said, Vice President Elliott, is that we still, even though we're in phase 4 and education is in phase 4, pre-K through 12 schools have not been approved to come back, right, to quote unquote normal or brick and mortar attendance. Higher education has, and I actually just read through those guidelines today. So Harry represented the district at the regional task force for HR. So he was with other folks who deal with HR across the state. He can certainly update you on those conversations. But we're operating from a framework that will have one of 3 scenarios: that we will continue online, and I know that's the least preferable, I think, for everyone, right? That we really don't want to do that, but we also know that we are seeing spikes in other states, and so we may have staff / family / children implications for our state of New York. We could also have a hybrid model, right, where we have some online, some in person, or maybe by grade level, or elementary, middle, or secondary. So we're entertaining that possibility, or we could return to brick and mortar with the CDC guidelines. And that's most recently, I was told by Superintendent, I sit on the Council of Great City Schools, that we really need to make sure that we're adhering to those guidelines, and more than likely they're not going to change. So those are our 3 situations or scenarios that we're looking at. And so until we really get clearance from Governor Cuomo about what to do, it makes it difficult, but we're making sure that we're looking at each area and that we are prepared, and what are the implications relative to staffing. So I'll pass the mic to Harry, and he can finish up where I left off.
Yes. Thank you, Superintendent. And that's basically the consensus of about 6 other HR managers across, and HR chiefs across the country. Basically, we all came to consensus that it's critical that if and when we do open schools, safety is paramount. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that the fact of the matter is that we all have the same concern in mind. It's how do we keep our employees safe, number 1. Number 2, how do we keep our students safe? And then number 3, how do we keep our community safe? And as you can well imagine, there is no really definitive answer to all of this, because this COVID-19 is new to all of us. So again, as Superintendent Leslie Myers has shared, the fact of the matter is that we are working collectively. This is us, the HR department, with our facilities, our IMT team, legal, benefits, and our nursing department, to really develop a comprehensive staffing reentry plan that accounts for the number 1 priority, the safety of our staff and our families. Once we have defined this model, we're going to, if you will, test it with the central office staffing. We'll use that as a template to roll out to the rest of the schools and the rest of the districts. Again, it's work in progress, but it's work that is a concern of really all of the school districts across the country.
So
Yeah,
two
I was
other
at
things, Vice President Elliott, that I just wanted to add. One, I shared a week or so ago that we're creating a framework that kind of describes this so our community can understand, because we haven't communicated that we have been meeting and that we have these subgroups and what are the things that we're considering. So we want to make that available. Carlos provided a draft to us today. And again, I had promised you all that that should be out within the first week of July. So you'll see it first, and then we'll send it out to our staff and then our family. So I want to just reiterate that. The second thing is that we are going to be doing surveys with our 3 stakeholder groups, and that will be staff first to find out, just about instructionally where we think we are, what are the gaps and what needs to be fortified, as well as, their safety and what their concerns are relative to quote unquote returning back for physical attendance. We're also going to survey students and we're going to survey families. So I think that's important that we get that voice. So we have drafts of those, but we will start with staff first and then move out. And then the third thing that we have to be incredibly mindful of is making sure that we're fortified with, hand sanitizer, with PPEs, right, et cetera. And then how do we deal with human resource wise if we have folks that say either I'm not comfortable, coming in, or I have underlying medical conditions, or my doctor has said it's not safe for me to come in, or I went to Florida and so I need 14 days. So this is constantly evolving, and we're constantly looking at how we can be proactively reactive, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But we are working, and we certainly appreciate our community's patience, our staff's patience, but that framework I think will at least show that we just haven't been sitting around twiddling our thumbs, that there's been active work, and it just gives different considerations of what we've been looking at and what we've been grabbing.
And one of our bus drivers was asking me about where we are. She says, because we haven't heard anything. So that information, that we need to get that out. So, our everybody, all of our stakeholders are aware. So thank you for that, Superintendent. Commissioner Ricardo, Commissioner Adams, you had a question?
We're at a party, you said?
Pete's birthday party. You remember Pete, right? Pete Smith?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, birthday party.
So we want to make sure that information is out there, and we will over communicate it.
Okay. Commissioner Adams, did you have a real question? All right. Commissioner LeBron?
I just had a couple of questions. And one of them you actually answered already, Dr. Myers, which was, how would you collect input from parents and students and teachers? So I'm glad to hear that you're being proactive about that. I do have two questions, one around the hybrid model. I know that a number of school districts, and I've read some articles around this hybrid model concept. My concern with the hybrid model, though, is that in this district, many of our families, it's almost a model that has a lot of privileges attached to it.
Agreed.
And I'll say that even for myself, right? I am taking it one day at a time right now, because schools are not open, because there are no summer camps that are physically open. But my agency, I have a job to do, and I'm, again, day by day trying to find childcare and manage. Working from home, and then also doing home visits, which is a big component of my job. But long term, I know that I can't sustain this schedule even for myself long term. One, it is incredibly stressful. Two, You know, I can't imagine trying to manage a hybrid model where I only have childcare a few days a week,
Sure.
and then I'm expected to be in the office full time. So I do share some concerns around that model for our school district. And I will say, I recognize I have privileges too, right? I drive, whereas, you know, 18 years ago when I started as a parent here, I didn't have a vehicle, and I had 2 little ones, and I had to catch the bus, and I definitely did not have the supports in place for childcare that I do now. So I'm concerned around that model and our parents and families that we serve in this district. And then the second piece is being in school with the CDC recommendations. I've also had a chance to review some of their recommendations. And for me, I feel like they're not realistic for our school district and our size in terms of affordability. And in terms of actual implementation, I can't imagine a 5-year-old, nor can I even imagine my own 9-year-old, and many people in this community and on the board are familiar with Sophia. I can't even take Sophia to the grocery store for an hour and a half to go shopping because of the mask, because
she had her mask on when I saw you guys. She was.
I know, it was like down here, I'm constantly telling her to put it up. But I can't imagine that this is what school will look like for her for 6-7 hours with a mask, and practicing not touching other kids where they're so, they are touchy at feeling. And I mean, school is, I always look at school and daycare sometimes as a germ factory too, right? I will admit that my kid, since school has been closed, we have had less colds and fevers and illnesses in the house since school has been closed. But I don't know if these are questions that are coming up in your conversations, but I definitely would like to have some answers around the hybrid model and the privileges of that model, and then the affordability of the CDC recommendations and the feasibility of that for our district.
Completely agree with what you say. And as I've been meeting with my superintendent colleagues in Monroe County, I have been very clear that Rochester will probably be the anomaly, right? That they have certain systems and privileges and other things in place, and just alone for our sheer size, right? So just trying to get our children to school on the yellow buses, and then how do we work out RTS, because that's a whole other situation. So, you know, I'm very cognizant of all of that, and we're just locally, we just are a standalone. We're going to be probably doing things very different. Even if the governor says, we'll certainly abide by those guidelines, but what Rochester does, I think, will look different from our suburban school counterparts with the things that you mentioned, as well as other things. Absolutely.
One thing you had spoke about 14-day quarantine for people from out of town. So what I know is that and school gets thrown into receivership, one of the factors is absenteeism. We're not going to be encouraging kids to come to school if they're sick, or if they come from out of state. So I'm wondering, are they going to have some waivers on this receivership factor of absenteeism?
So Commissioner Adams, great question. And you know, that's what I used to do. That's something I'm petitioning very heavily, that if we have students that either are quarantined, or what if we have parents that just really believe, I don't feel it's safe to send my child or children to school. I don't think we should be, I think it would be unfair for us to be dinged for that. So I am already putting a bug in my colleagues' ears at State Ed, but that is something that absolutely concerns me. And I also have spoken up again about the 3 through 8 assessments and Regents exams, right? They're not until the spring, right? In March, April, and May, but I continue to be concerned about that. So I'm advocating, and I'm working to articulate the concerns and needs for our district specifically, because that's my job.
Madam Superintendent, have you had any conversations with urban school districts around the country about COVID?
I do. Every Thursday from 11 to 12, I'm on with the Council of Great City Schools. So Philadelphia, Cleveland, Atlanta, et cetera. So districts that are much larger, right, than ours are grappling with these issues. And so frankly, we've been getting good information, and anytime I get something, I think my staff is certainly me sending links and PDFs, but anytime I get something that I think is useful, I'll click through or I'll speed read through, I'm sending that information out because this situation is constantly evolving. We know that some of our states to the south and to the west of us have, are further ahead, but we also know that some of our partners in the south and to the west, their states are shutting down again. And so this situation just is, it seems like it's kind of a little bit of a revolving door, or you have to step back because we're in phase 4, but who knows, we could step back to phase 3 or even phase 2, depending on what happens in our state, in our county specifically. So yes, I'm a part of those conversations weekly for an hour.
So who's a part, I want to go back to staff and doing COVID-19. Who do we actually have working in our buildings and who's working from home currently?
So I don't know, Mike, are you on here? If you can help me out. Yep, Mike is on, but I can answer that. And again, this decision, the initial decision was made to me prior, but we have, certainly our executive cabinet members are in and out, and some of our assistants or clerical staff are coming in. We highly limit the visitors who can come in, and when you walk into central office, you do have to have your temperature checked before you move through. You can buzz yourself in or get buzzed in. You also have to wear a mask if you are traveling through, if I'm coming up on the elevator and then coming down the hallway to my office. Once you're in your office or your space, you don't have to wear it, but if somebody else enters, you have to put the mask on. So, but my understanding, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, unless they're a food site, that none of our principals are in their schools or their APs with any regularity at this point.
That's correct, Superintendent.
Okay.
I see the president has his hand raised.
Yeah, Leslie, I know you know that we struggle already as a district to maintain some level of proficiency with our students when we have them in the classroom. And I don't know how anybody could, this is no reflection on you, of course, how anybody could expect that we could be successful. Again, anybody would expect. You might totally blow away those expectations. But right now, I don't know how anybody under the circumstance could expect that our scores and our performance would be better if our students aren't in the classroom. Then you got to add to that this issue of special needs students. And then you got to add to that, we already know our students, the research tells us we lose some of the development and growth, not development, but growth during the summer. And that only proves that it's more challenging to do this when children aren't present. I was reading an article that was recently released by, they strongly recommend all consideration for having children come to school. And the presumption should be that students should start being physically present in the classroom to preserve any prior gains. And that they talked about, this makes sense, that you should weigh the costs and benefits of leaving children at home vis-a-vis having them come to school. I just really worry that while parents might legitimately feel like, I don't feel my child is safe, and I know you've thought about this, that I just don't know the model, and you haven't had a chance to present it, that would make a parent look at those benefits and those costs and say, you know what, I think they can keep my kid safe, and so I'm going to send my kid to school. So what's really paramount, of course, as you know, is a clear and concise plan that not only takes into account the physicality of it, the CDC recommendations. Can they even logistically do that? 6 feet apart, then outside. They could do that in California, but they can't do that in Rochester. We just don't have the space to do that. There's the daycare issues. I think Commissioner LeBron or somebody mentioned that. So this plan, I know you got a lot to work on anyway, but this plan really has to be extremely thoughtful, comprehensive, and consider every possible opportunity. And even then, I would say to my colleagues and the rest of the community listening, even if you come up with such a plan, chances are it's going to cost you some money. Is it going to take more teachers? Because if you got to reduce the student-teacher ratio, right? Where's that money going to come from? So, you know, what the other thing we need to do is support that plan that you develop, which I think will require money. Is, you know, the House has what they call the HEROES Act. It calls for $100 billion to go towards education. We really need to lobby for that, because if you're going to have a credible plan, a clear plan that tells people, that makes parents feel safe, it's gonna require resources. People can talk all they want about, oh, well, we gotta be fiduciary, we gotta be strong fiduciary agents, we do. But to do not only what they've expected us to do with the students in the classroom, but to do that and not have them all in the classroom is gonna take money. There is not enough rocks to unturn. There's not enough blood to go around to take from this district. It's gonna take resources. You cannot do this on your own, Leslie. So I hope we can, in addition to support you, I hope we can get the Congress, the United States Congress, and Albany doesn't have any money, but if you're going to do this credible plan, it's going to take resources. It really is. So
sure, President White, just two things to respond to your comments. Chief Keisha Morgan and I actually had a good conversation with the rest of Cabinet, speaking about our concerns relative to our students with special needs. So that's a vulnerable population. And so we were, you know, brainstorming and kind of talking aloud about knowing that that population, we just happen to be talking about that population, but in particular, there are needs, right, and concerns. So we had some good conversations about that this morning. And then I don't know if you saw, I tweeted a little while ago an article that said minimally school districts will have to come up with $490 additionally per child because of COVID-related concerns. So, you know, that's why I'm continually saying we've got to create these savings accounts. We can't spend because we're going to have those additional costs. So we're constantly talking about this morning, noon, night. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, what is September, what is 7th or 8th going to be like in the Rochester City School District? And any one of those, online, solely, hybrid, in person, they all are not the optimal situation for us, right? Because even if we're in person, it's going to cost us way too much money. Again, just trying to get kids to school. So I don't want to be long-winded. We're constantly thinking about this. I just want to reiterate the plan that we're going to send out in the next week or so will just be the options and kind of just talk about our thought process so folks will understand, but that's in no way, shape, or form our final plan, obviously. But we at least we want our community to know that we're being thoughtful and that here's what's going into our thought process.
I want to thank Vice President Elliott for putting this on the agenda for your committee. This is a very important topic, and I'm sure, even though we don't have the answers there, I'm sure people are glad to hear us talking about it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we have one more item, a presentation on the district civil service process, and Joanne Jafrida is going to be joining us, right, Harry?
Excuse me.
Can you hear you, Harry?
Muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, Joanne Jafrida is going to be joining us. Unfortunately, she could not join us via Zoom, but she is going to be on audio. But again, Vice President Elliott, thank you for allowing us to share this topic. One of the things I thought that in order to present this topic with some fidelity, that is the reason why I asked Joanne Jafrida, who currently right now is the Deputy Director of the Civil Service, Monroe County Civil Service Commission, and she is on audio, and she will help us to present this category. Could I share? Could Marisol, could you allow me to share something on my document?
And while that is getting prepared, if you recall, this was an area that we had some conversation around, and so I wanted to present so that we understand how the civil service process works. If you recall, I believe it was last week's or the weeks before, we had some concerns around some of the candidates around the civil service process. So I thought that it would be important to have this on the agenda for this month.
Thank you very much. Joanne, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, can everyone hear Joanne?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay.
Let me just, Joanne, this is Cynthia Elliott. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Cynthia, and how are you?
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to present this for us. The board had some questions about this process, and I thought that it would be appropriate to have it on the HR agenda. So thank you for being willing to make the presentation, Joanne.
Oh, you're welcome. It's very detailed, obscure stuff, and most people who've never worked with it don't understand it, so I'm happy to try and enlighten.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I wanted to go to the second slide, Joanne, and basically the discussion document that basically states the purpose of the presentation. And really it is to share the presentation, to allow everyone the opportunity to test for understanding, and then allow time for questions and answers. From a processing standpoint, I thought that we would, again, share the process, make sure the process is understood, and then really define what our next steps are going to be. I basically identified 30 minutes for this this conversation or presentation. If we get done sooner, that's great. If not, we'll stay as long as it takes. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to go right to slide number 3. Joanne, you're on. Take it away.
I believe you have the slides in front of you, so I'm not going to read the slides word for word unless you would prefer that I do that. However, if any of you have any questions along the way, ask the questions, because I think we'll have a better conversation if we have it while we're on the topic. Many people may not know, but civil service law basically governs employment in the public sector in New York State. And it applies to all of the public employers, including state government, counties, towns, villages, notably school districts as well, to our purpose tonight. And the state civil service law is basically delivered through each county civil service commission, in our case, the Monroe County Civil Service Commission. We are a little bit unusual in Monroe County in that the Rochester city government has their own civil service commission as well. And that civil service commission oversees City of Rochester hiring as well as the Rochester Housing Authority. We in Monroe County government oversee the hiring for everybody else, including the Water Authority, all the towns, villages, and school districts. So when we come to school districts, and as you know, I've worked for a school district, basically the job titles in every school district fall into one of two groups. The certificated employees, the certificated job titles, are those that are governed by New York State education law and involve getting a certificate. Basically, teachers and administrators, the instructional staff. We're not going to spend time on that part of the house tonight. I don't think that's your area of interest tonight. The rest of the organization is basically what we call classified jobs. They are classified with the Monroe County Civil Service Commission in accordance with New York State Civil Service law. For a school, 6 different classes of civil service jobs. But in a school district, we are primarily talking about 2 different classes of civil service titles. The non-competitive class job titles are job titles for which there are minimum qualifications. So in order to hold the job of, say, a bus driver, you have to meet certain stated minimum qualifications. It might be educational, it might be particular kinds of experience, or some combination thereof. And basically you will find those job titles in places like food service, transportation, the skilled trades, building maintenance. The other jobs are what we call the competitive class jobs. And I usually describe competitive class jobs basically as office workers, and supervisors, and to some extent, technical job titles. I think some people would choose to look at these two different classes in terms of more blue-collar work versus traditional white-collar work. The positions in the competitive class are the positions for which you must pass a civil service exam and be able to be appointed from the resulting civil service list in order to gain a permanent appointment and permanent rights to the job title. So let me stop there. Any questions so far?
I didn't see any hands raised before. So
Okay.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Okay. So it's hard to believe, but the civil service, the New York State Civil Service Commission basically writes a written exam for each specific job title. And the goal, of course, is to make job titles as relevant and specific to the actual work that's being done, which is why they do specific exams for each title. So, first of all, in order to even be considered for a competitive class job, whether it's to take the exam or to be directly appointed as a provisional, you have to meet the stated minimum qualifications for the job. And just like the non-competitive class. So it's usually a combination of specific types of educational and job experiences that you have to meet in order to qualify to sit in a competitive class job. If there is no current civil service list attached to the job title, when you want to fill a job in that title, we make what's called a provisional appointment. So the school district in this case can advertise an open job, and they can tell people, here are the minimum qualifications you need to meet in order to work in this job. People will apply, and then the school district will look at everybody who meets the minimum qualifications and can select the person they would like to hire for that position on a provisional basis. The term provisional means what it implies. It's temporary. That is, you have no claims to the job on a permanent basis. And in fact, it doesn't really give you any particular advantage when competing for the job on a permanent basis. Because like everybody else, when the exam is announced, the provisional employee must take the exam and must meet the same standard as everyone else in order to be considered for permanent appointment. So a person can be in a job provisionally for a few months or a few years. It all depends on when the state gives the examination for that particular title. And almost all of our exams in Monroe County are written by the state. There are a few exams that we give locally, but for the most part, these are written multiple choice exams that are written by New York State. So if you have made a provisional appointment and then a year, 2 years later, whenever the exam is announced, then the exam is announced to the public. So not only will the provisional employees sign up for the exam, but anybody in the public at large who wants to take that exam and who meets the minimum qualifications is eligible to sit for the exam. The only requirement or limitation is that we require the person have been a resident of Monroe County for 4 months before they sit for an exam. We do occasionally Monroe County Civil Service Commission must make that decision. And they're very vigilant about protecting residency. So I think the philosophy for the most part is that we want to give exams and hire people to work in our local government and school districts. We want to hire people who live in Monroe County. We don't want to hire people who live just over the line or could commute but don't live in our county. And most counties are like that. So the exam is given.
Question.
Right now, frankly, we're in a very unfortunate situation.
Joanne, there's a question.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
So at the beginning of this, maybe about a minute or two ago, you had said something that provisional is appointed when there's no list. Is that the only time a provisional is appointed, when there's not? That means there's no list. Maybe I misunderstood you.
That's correct. Yes, and it's a kind of a confusing point, but what I'm trying to say is that when you go to hire somebody in a particular job title, we in Monroe County work closely with the Human Resources Office in the city school district, and the city school district will check with us to see if there is an active civil service list for the title you're looking to fill. If there isn't an active list, there's no list of names that we can choose from, then the district is free to hire whomever meets the minimum qualifications. That's what we call a provisional hire.
All right, thank you.
If there's a list, then you must hire from one of the names who are reachable on the civil service list.
Okay.
I see Commissioner LeBron has a question.
Okay.
Commissioner LeBron.
I was actually going to save them, but I see you guys said go ahead and jump in and ask, because in the beginning they said to save them, so I wrote some of them down. And it has to do around the provisional appointments. So just in reading what you wrote here and also what you're saying, it kind of concerns me, because I feel like if we have someone in the position and it's supposed to be geared, the test is supposed to be geared towards the actual duties of the title and the position, and then we have someone provisionally in the position and they did not score in the top scores. I don't know what that actually, how to interpret that and what that would mean in terms of whether that person is qualified to do that job based on this test. And can you speak a little bit about that, or experience with others who are kind of in that position?
Yeah, yes, I can. The system itself, the civil service testing system, is, in my view, and I've worked with it for decades, it's an imperfect system. So, we like to think that both the job description with the minimum qualifications and the written tests that follow closely match what the duties of the position are. So that, in fact, when somebody's sitting down to take a test for a job, it's actually testing things they would have to know to do the job. It's an imperfect system. The tests are written in Albany centrally. They are sent out then to county civil service commissions all across the state. And, everybody does the best they can to match up exams and job titles with what the actual duties are in any given municipality. It's not perfect.
Okay, and that was actually a second question, which was how would the state know the duties of a job locally when job titles and responsibilities kind of, even though the title itself could be the same, the duties really do tend to differ from district to district or agency to agency. Yeah. I think you kind of answered that. I also wanted to understand who serves on the 5-person committee that you just mentioned and how they're selected. And what the diversity on that committee looks like. So if you could speak a little bit about that.
The Civil Service Commission is a 5-member body that meets once a month. And the Civil Service Commission is appointed by the county executive and ratified by the Monroe County Legislature. The only rule that governs appointments on the Civil Service Commission is that there can be no more than 3 people from the same political party. It would be, I would like to tell you that this is not a political process, but that's in fact in the county legislature when hiring. So at present, and these positions pay a small amount for work that involves meeting once per month. And basically, they review appointments in every jurisdiction in Monroe County. They approve new job descriptions. They it's kind of a ministerial job. In some ways, it's like the Board of Education's job, but less active, I would say, than a board. And I think that County Executive Bello, who of course has only been on the job since January 1st, has had the opportunity to fill one position on the Civil Service Commission. So we have, and they are appointed, by the way, for 6-year terms of office. So you're really limited in terms of affecting turnover on the Civil Service Commission, because unless somebody leaves, the positions don't turn over that often. We've had people serve on the Monroe County Civil Service Commission literally for decades.
And the diversity around there?
Pardon me?
The diversity, the makeup of that committee? I was just wondering what the diversity.
Yeah, I haven't been to a meeting lately, but I think no. In fact, I think it's 5 white men, actually. I don't even think there's a woman on the board. The long-standing female member of the commission retired in December. And so, no, there is no diversity on that commission. No.
Thank you.
Are the names listed on the Monroe County website, Joanne?
They should be.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, the Monroe County Legislature publishes an annual book called the Monroe County Directory.
Mm-hmm.
And they should be listed in that. I'm just looking at it now. They should be listed. Yes. They should be listed in that directory. I would think you would have access to that in the school district office.
All right, thank you.
Oh, let's see. But I think they're listed there.
And we can take that action to pull that, Joanne, so
Yeah.
not to take away.
If you can't find it,
Yep.
Harry, you can certainly ask me and I'll send a copy over to you.
Good enough.
Yeah, it's
Thank
pretty
you.
easy to do.
Commissioner, do you have
I
any questions?
wanted to make a point going back about the Monroe County Civil Service Office.
I think there's one another question.
Okay.
Okay.
This is my last question, because I think this whole presentation came about us having 2 meetings and conversations around civil service. So my final question really stemmed from a situation where someone was a little bit lower on the list. So there was a 90%, 95% score, a 90% score, an 85, 85, and no, 95, 90, 85, 2 80s, and 2 75s. So this individual scored in the 75 percentile and was apparently reachable because there were people in the 95th and 90% that had declination letters, and so that made them reachable. And I just wanted to understand how that process works in terms of the top 3 scores, then if the 2 declinations for the 95% and 90% then makes them reachable at 75% because there was one for 85% for score, and then 4 people that were kind of tied at the 80% and 75%.
So Commissioner LeBron, that goes right into the next slide. So,
Okay.
Joanne, I'm going to go to slide number 5, okay?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so
You're muted, Commissioner.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Did somebody have a question?
I did have one last question so that I can get an understanding on this.
Sure.
Me and you applied for a job. You got the job. Am I eliminated off a list, or does the list stay on there in case you quit or whatever? Am I still on the list, or the whole list is eliminated? Did you hear me?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the end. Could you repeat that, please?
So you and I got on the list to get a job. You got the job. Does that eliminate the list? Say that you quit next month. Is the list still available?
Correct. The list is usually, the lists are established for a minimum of 1 year. Can be extended as well. They can be extended to several years, but they all live for at least a year. So if you hired somebody off the civil service list and they left the job 6 months after they were appointed, then the school district in this case would have to go back to that same list and run the process over again to hire a new person. But they would be limited to the people whose names are on that list.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Joanne, I'm on slide 5 now, Joanne.
Yeah, yeah. So when our residents take civil service exams, there's a lot of security around the handling of the test papers. They are bundled and literally sent to Albany. They are corrected in Albany, and then some months, usually 3 to 4 months later, the list, what we call the list of eligibles, is returned to the county. And the county then works with our various municipalities to send out lists where they have positions that have to be filled on a permanent basis, in this case, the school district. So we have a list, we have names in rank order based on their finishing score on the test, highest to lowest. The state in recent years has made a practice of grouping scores into bands. So we used to get scores a long time ago that would be very specific. 82, 83, 97, very specific. Now they tend to be grouped in bands of like 5, usually 5. So that's why the earlier example, we had a 95, a 90, an 85. That's typically how lists look now. And in order to figure out who's reachable, you count down to the person with the third highest score. Everybody who is at that score and above that person is eligible for appointment. So although we call it the rule of 3, very often you have more than 3 people to choose from. So I think you know what I mean, but let's just say you have one person at 95, one person at 90, and 4 people at 85. You can consider all 4 people at 85 plus the person at 90 plus the person at 95, because those are the top 3 scores. So in that example I just cited, you would have 6 people that you could consider for appointment. And the way that consideration process goes, now Monroe County, we have passed off the list to the City School District Human Resources Office. The City School District HR Office typically will do what we call a canvas. I think we all know what a canvas is. We send a letter, the district will send a letter out to each of those top people and say, we're looking to fill the job of X. This is what the job pays. Are you still interested in the job? Because at this point, it might be 4, 5, 6 months since they actually applied for the exam. And so we want to find out if they're still interested. Typically people are, but not always. Letters come back, and based on how people respond to those canvas letters, it may allow you to further consider other people lower down the list. That's where, as it was pointed out earlier by one of your commissioners, that's where declination letters come into play. There are reasons why somebody who's on that list can write back and say, you know, I'm not interested. I'm not interested right now because I'm temporarily unavailable. I may be caring for a sick family member. I may be traveling. I may be enrolled in school full time. I may be ill. There may be reasons why a person would be temporarily unavailable. That could also mean that, so they could also decide that the geographic location of the position is not what they want. This comes into play. I used to see this a lot in the school district that I worked for, where we would canvass for a particular job title, a particular school within the district. And somebody answering the canvas letter might say, you know, I don't want to work at that school. So they could decline based on the location of that particular position. In those cases, we would take the person off the list for positions in that school, but leave them on the list for consideration to be appointed in other locations. Questions about declination letters?
Commissioner LeBron, your hand is up. Is that an old hand or you have another question?
It's an old hand, but I guess I'm just still trying to understand. So if someone puts up a declination letter, Because even just based on thinking and in the scores that I'm thinking, the person who scored 95 declined the position. That then brings the scores that are in the top 3 to 85, 80, and then I guess 75. Okay, it makes sense. So I hear what you're saying. So even though it's the rule of 3, it's, well, 85, 80, and then 75 would have been the third score, even though there could be 4 people at 75. If 75 was in the top 3 scores because the highest score declined, then you can pick from any of those 3 scores and whoever falls under those 3 scores.
It's not exactly correct.
Okay, so clarify that for me.
It is, you have to have a choice of at least 3 people. So in that case, the example I gave you is not a good one, because if the top person, the only one person who had a 95 declined, you would still have 5 people available between the second and third scores. And so that's all you can consider. You can't go to the next lower score until you have less than 3 people available.
Okay, so that kind of confuses me even more because
it is
so we have someone at 95 that declined, and then let's just say the person at 85 then declines, which was the second highest score. Does that then bring those who are in the 80 percentile and the 75 percentile as a list to draw from?
You know, it depends on how many people. You have to have at least 3 names that you can consider who are interested and available. And you can only go to the next lower score when you have less than 3 names. So if you have 4 people who pass the exam with a score of 85, you would have to have several people decline before you could go below the score of 85.
So there was a 95% person that declined. There was an 85% person that declined. Let's just throwing that out there. And then there are people who are left in the 80 percentile. I believe there are 2. And then there are 2 that scored at the 75 percentile. So that gives us a list of 4. Can you then draw from those 4 names someone who was in the 75 percentile?
So in the hypothetical that you're giving me, you have 1 person at 95 who declined, correct?
Correct.
And 1 person at 85 who declined.
Correct.
And then 2 people who passed and are interested at 80.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I don't know if they are interested or not. Let's just hypothetically say they're not. Let's just say they are. What if they are? What if the folks at 80?
You have at least 3 people.
Yeah, so I'm just checking the scores. There are 95, 85, 80, 80, and 2 at 75 and 1 at 70. So the person who was at 95 declines, the person at 85 declines. That leaves you with 2 people at 80 and 2 people at 75. Are we then allowed to pull from someone who's at 75?
What happened to the person who scored 90?
95, they decline.
And you had no one scoring 90?
No one scoring 90. The next highest score is 85.
Is 85. So you have 1 at 95 who declined, 1 at 85 who declined, 2 people at 80 who said they were interested.
Correct. Hypothetically. And then 2 at 75. The lowest score is 70.
75 is also available.
Yes, everybody at 75 is available. 2 at 80 are available. The lowest score is 70.
Yes, and the person who scored 70 would not be available unless there were more people declining the position.
Correct. But could we draw from that 75 if the person at 95 and 85 declined.
And by the way, when somebody declines an appointment, the ultimate decision to accept that decline or not rests with the Monroe County Civil Service Office. But then ultimately, it's the Monroe County Civil Service Office that will determine whether or not the declination meets the rules in our Civil Service Commission's rules. In other words, is it a correct declination? Can we accept it or not? So it's really out of the hands of the school district.
Commissioner LeBron, did you?
Yeah, I'm still trying to understand if we can still reach that person at 75 if the scores are 80, 80, 75, 75. And there are 4 people.
I would think not if you got, didn't you have like 2 at 80 and one?
We had two at 80, 1 at 95, 1 at 85, but those 2 declined. Let's just hypothetically say they declined. That leaves us with 2 individuals at 80, 2 at 75. Does that person now become reachable at 75 because we have the 95 and the 85 that decline?
The top 3. So, but you got a couple of people who are scoring the same score. So,
yes.
Yeah.
So are they reachable at the 75 if the 95 and the 85 decline?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you have 2, you're telling me you have 2 people at 80.
2 people at 80, 2 at 75.
2 at 80. And 2 people is not, we consider that not a valid list. So in order to give the hiring department or the hiring body, the city school district, a choice of at least 3, you get to move down to the next score, which in this case would be 75. The fact is everybody who scores 75 then becomes eligible. In this case, you're suggesting it's 2 people. So you would have 2 people with a score of 80, 2 people with a score of 75. That would constitute the group that's available for appointment.
Okay, thank you.
Clear?
In that example.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner LeBron, for that. You can go on, Joanne.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
She said we can move forward.
Continue.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So we're still on page 5, Joanne. Okay, so.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, okay. So we're on the 3rd bullet on page 5.
Yeah, I did want to thank you for that because I did want to make that point. I thought it was important. We can, as I said, the Monroe County Civil Service Commission, when we give exams, they're open to all residents of Monroe County. However, when you go to hire in a particular location, and in this case, let's talk about the city school district, you can request a residency certification, which I assume you do. I know I did when I was there. I think it's a wonderful way to steer work positions to city residents, which I think is what you want to do in the city school district.
Is that what we do here?
What we wanted to do. And by that, I mean that if you ask us for a resident certification, the Monroe County Civil Service Office is going to send the city school district a list of everybody who passed the civil service exam, but only those who live in the city. So it will rule out people who live in Greece, who live in Irondequoit. Now, the Greece School District and the town of Irondequoit, they can request their own resident certifications when they are filling jobs in their geographic locality. But I think it's a powerful tool that school districts and local governments can use to give preference in hiring to their residents. So I just wanted you to be aware that it's a nice thing to be able to do.
Do we do that already, Harry?
Yes, we do.
All right,
Yes,
thank
we
you.
do. All right. So we'll now go to slide number 6, Joanne.
Yep. Okay. We've talked about, well, after the kid, I think we've pretty much covered slide number 6. Just to say that after you have considered people, sent them canvas letters, they've let you know who's interested, The school district will collect the canvas letters. They will decide who from among the eligibles they want to appoint, and they'll send all that paperwork back to Monroe County. We then check to make sure that the appointment is within the top 3 scores. We make sure that if there are any declination letters, that they meet the requirements in the county civil service rules. And we make what's called a probationary appointment at that point. Now, just to say that, and I think one of the commissioners was alluding to this before, it can be a sticky situation when you had somebody in a position provisionally years, and they are not able to be appointed on a permanent basis. What that means, in essence, is that they are removed from the job, because the school district will be required to appoint somebody who's reachable for appointment on that civil service list. I think that's the end of the presentation, but as we know on the last page, I'd be happy to answer more questions. This has been a very interesting discussion.
Joanne, I have a question about the staff of the board. Given that the staff of the board, the commissioners are elected, I was somewhat taken aback that the staff that we hire have to go through the civil service process. Why is that, Joanne?
Yeah, well, you are, as elected officials, in what we call the unclassified service. So the Civil Service Commission has no jurisdiction over you at all. We don't do anything with your jobs. They're entirely separate. I am not sure what, I have to fall back on my days on the board, and we had a much smaller staff then. We had, I think, a couple of secretaries, and they were considered in the exempt class of civil service because they were working directly for the commissioners, and therefore were considered at-will employees. The board commissioners had the authority to hire whomever they wished for those jobs. Now, I know in recent years your staff has expanded because of the audit function that the board has been required to take on, among other things, correct?
Correct.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask Harry for help here because I don't have the documents in front of me. I'm not sure what the classification status of those positions is, and I didn't come prepared to talk about that. So I'm going to lean on Harry for this.
So,
if you'd like me to, Harry.
No. And I'm going to defer to Derek Jones because he's my civil service director. Yeah, Derek, do you know the answer to that question?
So most of the staff on the board, if we're talking support, is made up of clerical. There's also a title of executive assistants. I'm just going off the top of my head. Liaison, there's a liaison in that makeup, and those are all within the competitive titles. So, we would have to look to make sure that that there's no list. They may be,
right.
Sorry about the camera there. They may be, we may be able to provide them appointments if they're on a list. If there's no list, we can provisionally appoint, but they are considered to be in the competitive title. Therefore, we follow civil service law to do any appointments.
I guess, but I don't know if that answers my question. If we are elected, the commissioners are elected, I would think that we would have the right, that they would be at-will employees. Is that the right term or should be used? That we can appoint them without the need of civil service authority or oversight is what I'm inquiring about.
I would be happy to work with Derek and with Harry to take a look at that. Honestly, I didn't come prepared to talk about that tonight. I would be happy to look at it. There are a lot of rules that govern what class of civil service positions are put into. And I think it's going to be a little bit complicated to answer your question, but we will answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, you're welcome.
Joanne, thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Any other questions from the commissioners? Thank you. And so, Harry, I'll let you end the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Joanne, thank you very much. The board members, thank you, and for allowing us to present this information to you. And I think, Joanne, that does it for us, for you for right now, okay?
Great, and great questions. It was a good discussion. I appreciated being part of it. Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you,
take care.
Joanne.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay, we've got one item that we have to go into executive session on. So I'm going to make a motion for us to go into executive session.
Motion.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.